3 years ago, I landed at Václav Havel Airport in Prague with 2 suitcases and $210,000 in my bank account. It was everything I had. That wasn't just some number on a screen. It was tangible. It was the weight of 40 years of work, of getting up in the dark Ohio mornings to go weld steel. It was the equity from the 3-bedroom house I sold, the one my kids grew up in. It was my entire modest 401k, cashed out and sitting in one place. $210,000. The sum total of my life's work, meant to last me until the very end. Today, this is what's left. This apartment. This single chair. $9,000 in the bank. I have a 1-year lease on this place that I absolutely cannot afford, in a country where I can't even read the street signs. And there's a woman I thought I was building a life with, who doesn't answer my calls anymore. Her number might not even be active. I haven't had the courage to find out for sure. People back home, when they hear about this, they'll tell you I got robbed. My son will clench his jaw and call them criminals. My ex-wife will just shake her head and say I was a fool looking for a fantasy. But they'd both be wrong. Nobody forced my hand. No one held a gun to my head or broke into my bank account in the middle of the night. I gave it all away, willingly. I signed the documents. I authorized the wire transfers. Every single step of the way, I thought I was being smart, that my blue-collar pragmatism was protecting me from the kind of thing that happened to other people, less careful people, less experienced people. I thought I could read people better than that. I was wrong. This isn't a story about a robbery. This is the story of how I paid a fortune for a dream, and I need to tell you exactly how it happened, from the very beginning, so that you don't pay for the same one. To understand how I ended up in that empty room, you need to understand the man I was 3 years ago. I wasn't a fool. I wasn't reckless. I was a man who believed in solid things. For 40 years, I was a lead welder back in Dayton, Ohio. I built things that were meant to last, out of steel. And steel doesn't lie. You learn to read it, to see the stress points, to know the difference between a clean weld and a weak joint that's going to fail. That was my world. Tangible things, cause and effect. I prided myself on a kind of common sense I thought was bulletproof. My life had been a straight line. I got married, had 2 kids, bought a house, and paid it off. For 35 years, that was the foundation. Then, 2 years before I retired, the foundation cracked. My wife, Linda, told me she was leaving. Said we'd grown apart since the kids moved out. It blindsided me. One day you're a husband, the next you're just a guy living in a house full of memories that don't belong to you anymore. The silence in that 3-bedroom home was louder than any factory floor I'd ever been on. I was 60 years old, retired, divorced, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely and utterly invisible. My kids were good kids, but they were busy with their own lives. A phone call here and there. I was basically put out to pasture. One Tuesday night, drowning in that silence, I was scrolling through YouTube. A video pops up. Some young guy with a camera walking through a stunning old city, holding up a huge mug of beer and grinning. This only costs $1.50. Behind him there are people laughing, lights strung between beautiful old buildings. It was Prague. I'd barely ever thought about the place. But in that moment, it wasn't just a city. It was an answer. I'm not an impulsive man. I didn't book a ticket the next day. I attacked it like a project. For 6 months, my evenings were filled with research. I was on every expat forum, reading every blog, watching dozens of videos about the cost of living in the Czech Republic. I had spreadsheets. I sold the house for $180,000. I cashed out my 401k, which added another $30,000. $210,000 total. The math was simple and undeniable. On my shoestring retirement budget in Ohio, that money would bleed away. But in Prague, where a beer was $1.50 and a nice meal was $10, that money could last me the rest of my life. I could live, not just survive. This wasn't some midlife crisis fantasy. This was a logical, calculated plan. I was executing a project, and I was sure, absolutely sure, that my real-world smarts would see me through. The plane touching down at Václav Havel Airport felt like the first real breath I'd taken in 2 years. I stepped out into the crisp air, and it was like the gray Ohio fog in my head finally started to clear. The first few weeks were a good blur. I got a little Airbnb in Prague 1, right in the thick of it. Every morning I'd walk out the door and pick a direction. I walked for miles. Across the Charles Bridge, through the Old Town Square, watching that astronomical clock do its thing. For the first time since Linda left, I wasn't just waiting for the day to end. I was actually in it. The loneliness I felt in that big empty house back home, it was gone. I was anonymous here, sure, but I wasn't invisible. I found a little cafe a few blocks from my place. Strong coffee, not fancy. It became my spot. I'd sit there for an hour every morning with my cup, watching the neighborhood go about its day. And that's where I met Jana. She was a waitress there, 45, with a smile that just made you feel warm. Not flashy, not performative, just genuinely warm in the way a good person is warm. Her English was good, and she had this way of asking questions. Not like she was just making conversation to pass the time, but like she was genuinely interested in the answers. I told her about my life back in Dayton, about being a welder. Her eyes didn't glaze over the way people's eyes glaze over when you tell them you work with your hands. She asked about the kinds of things I built, what it felt like to join 2 pieces of steel into something permanent. For the first time in years, I felt like someone was actually listening to me. I felt seen. After so long feeling like a ghost back in Ohio, that feeling is a powerful, dangerous thing. You'll drink it down like water in a desert, and you won't stop until the glass is empty. After a couple of weeks, she sat down at my table after her shift. "Frank," she said, "this Airbnb is a tourist trap. You are paying too much, and you are living like a visitor. You need a real check apartment, a home." She said it with such sincerity. It felt like she was taking me under her wing. She was the local guide I needed to navigate the gap between being a tourist and building an actual life. She found the apartment in Vinohrady. If you've ever been to Prague, you know Vinohrady. Tree-lined streets, elegant old buildings, real parks where people walk their dogs and kids play. It felt substantial. It felt like the kind of place where a man could settle in and mean it. This was the life I saw in those YouTube videos. The dream, made real. Of course, it was expensive. The landlord wanted a big security deposit plus 3 months' rent paid up front, and he wanted it in cash. My alarm bells should have been screaming. A $10,000 cash transaction with a man I'd never met, in a country whose laws I barely understood. But Jana just shrugged, gave me that warm smile. "It's different here, Frank. Not everything is credit cards and bank transfers. Sometimes, for the best places, this is just how it's done." And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? I was getting out of the tourist zone, setting up a real life, with the help of a trusted local friend. I went to the bank, pulled out 220,000 Czech crowns, about $10,000, and handed over a thick envelope of cash. I didn't feel scared. I felt smart. I felt like I was finally putting down roots. That first month in Vinohrady was, I think, the happiest I'd been in a decade. The apartment had high ceilings and those big windows that flooded the place with light. Every morning I'd make coffee and watch the street below come to life. The quiet hum of the trams, people walking their dogs in the park across the way. It felt like home. and everything confirmed I'd made the right move. A visit to a private clinic Jana recommended cost me $60 total. Back in Ohio, that wouldn't even cover the copay. A lunch of goulash and dumplings with a big cold beer, $7. I was living well, and my bank account was barely noticing. My life with Jana became the center of everything. She helped me navigate the city, taught me a few words of Czech, mostly poorly, and filled the apartment with laughter. I loved being able to take care of her. Nice dinners in the old town, a weekend trip to Český Krumlov. Seeing the look on her face walking through that fairy tale town made me feel like the man I used to be. A provider, a man of substance. My monthly spending was definitely higher than my spreadsheet had projected, maybe triple, but I didn't care. It felt like an investment in happiness. And I had the money. I told myself I was using it for exactly what it was meant for. About 3 months after I moved into the apartment, Jana brought up her cousin Pavel. "You have to meet my cousin Pavel," she said one evening. "He is like you, Frank, a real man, works with his hands." Pavel was a builder, late 40s, big guy, strong handshake, dust on his boots. He looked me in the eye when he talked. He wasn't a salesman, he was a craftsman. He told me about his work renovating old communist-era apartment blocks, bringing them back to life. The way he described it, the problem-solving, the satisfaction of fixing what was broken, it landed on me like a familiar language. He spoke my language, the language of materials, of structure, of making something solid out of something that everyone else had written off. One afternoon, the three of us were having coffee, and Pavel spread papers out on the table with the easy confidence of a man who had done this 100 times. "Frank," he said, "I have opportunity, big opportunity, but must move fast." It was a distressed apartment in Brno, the country's second biggest city. He had pictures, a wreck, water stains, crumbling plaster, exposed pipes. But he also had spreadsheets, projections, renovation costs, potential sale price. He walked me through it, line by line, the way I would have walked a foreman through a project plan. Buy it low, his crew would gut and rebuild it in 6 months, and we could flip it for nearly double the investment. It was tangible. I could see it. It wasn't some number on a stock market screen, some abstract bet on a company I'd never set foot in. It was wood and pipes and concrete, things I understood in my bones. I felt that old confidence swell in my chest. This I understood. This was a real project. "Why me?" I asked. Pavel looked at Jana, then back at me. "Bank is slow, too much paper. With you, we are partners. We move fast. We both make good money." Jana put her hand on my arm. "Pavel is the best, Frank. Everyone in our family trusts him with everything." There was one flag I should have caught. The contract was entirely in Czech. I asked for an English version. Jana laughed lightly, as if it were a charming misunderstanding. "Frank, this is Czech Republic. Don't worry. I will read it for you." She sat next to me, pointing to different paragraphs, her voice calm and reassuring. "This part says you are 50-50 partner. This part shows the investment amount. This part says he must finish in 6 months." She was my translator, my partner. It felt like we were a team, the three of us, building something together. I did not get my own lawyer. I did not verify the property ownership independently. I did not do any of the things a man of my supposed common sense should have done before signing anything, let alone wiring $80,000 across international borders. To secure the property and start the work, Pavel needed exactly that, $80,000, 1,760,000 Czech crowns, a huge chunk of my savings, nearly half of what I had left. But I told myself, this wasn't abstract. This was a renovation. I was a welder from Ohio who knew a solid structure when he saw one. I authorized the wire. I walked out of that bank feeling 10 feet tall. I wasn't just a retiree anymore. I was an investor. I was building something. The feeling was so good, I didn't notice the door closing behind me. For the first 6 months after that $80,000 transfer, I was on top of the world. The project in Brno was moving forward, or so I thought. My life in Prague was everything I had dreamed of, and I leaned into it. Jana and I were settled into a comfortable domestic routine. I was a man with a home, a partner, and a business venture. Every nice dinner I paid for, every little gift I bought, reinforced the feeling. I was visible again. I was substantial. It felt like a small price to pay for finally feeling like myself. Then one Tuesday, Pavel called. He didn't sound like the confident builder I'd met. He sounded stressed. "Frank, we have problem. Big problem." His crew had opened up the walls and found disaster. The rot in the support beams was worse than anyone could have seen. The wiring was a complete tear-out, a fire hazard. He sent pictures to my phone. Dark, damp wood, frayed wires. It looked bad. It looked real. "To fix this, Frank, I need more money," he said. $40,000. My stomach tightened. That was another huge piece of my savings. I hesitated. "Frank," he said firmly, "every day we wait, the cost goes up. And if we walk away now, the first money is gone. Just gone." He was right. I felt it in my gut. I was pot committed. Walking away meant accepting an $80,000 loss. It meant admitting to myself and to Jana that I had failed. My pride wouldn't let me do it. I was a man who finished his projects. I'd spent 40 years reading steel, seeing the stress points. This was just a structural problem. You find it, you fix it, you move on. I went back to the bank. I authorized the second transfer. I didn't feel 10 feet tall this time. I just felt determined. I had to see this through. The next 6 months were different. The easy happiness was gone, replaced by a low-level hum of anxiety. I was checking my bank account constantly. Pavel would send occasional updates, more pictures, a new wall framed out, a pile of old pipes. It looked like progress, but it felt slow. My relationship with Jana was the one thing that felt solid. When I'd get worried, she'd put her hand on my arm. "Frank, it's okay. Pavel is a perfectionist. He is building it to last, for us." And I'd believe her. I needed to believe her. Then came the final call. Pavel was in a total panic. I met him and Jana at a cafe. He was pale, sweating. He spread a document on the table, covered in official-looking stamps, all in check. "Tax," he said, pointing at a long paragraph. "The old owner didn't pay tax for 10 years. The government put a lien on the property, a big one. If we didn't pay it off within 48 hours, the state would seize the apartment. We would lose everything. The property, the 80,000, the 40,000. All of it." "How much?" I asked. My voice was a whisper. Pavel wrote a number on a napkin. $50,000. Almost everything I had left. My mind was screaming. This was wrong. The urgency, the constant crises. But I looked at Jana. Her face was a mask of worry, her eyes pleading. She was terrified for us. And my pride kicked in one last time. I couldn't be the man who lost everything and had to crawl home a failure. I was too deep in. The only way out was forward. I emptied my account. I made the final transfer in a state of numb panic. A week went by. I tried calling Pavel for confirmation that the lien was cleared. His phone went straight to a disconnected message. I felt cold dread creep up my spine. When I told Jana, she put on the performance of a lifetime. She flew into a rage, screaming in Czech into her own phone, leaving furious messages for Pavel. She turned to me, tears in her eyes. "He has shamed our family, Frank. He has stolen from us." She held me while I just sat there, hollowed out. She stayed for another month. But something had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by distance. Then one morning I woke up and the apartment was just silent. Her side of the closet was empty. Her toiletries gone from the bathroom. I called her number. "The number you have dialed is not in service." I knew. Deep down, I already knew. But I had to see it. I had to stand in front of it. I took the first train to Brno. I found the address from Pavel's original paperwork. It was a nice building, clean, well-maintained. I buzzed the apartment number. A woman's voice answered in Czech. I just said, "Pavel? Pavel?" A man came to the intercom and opened the door. He was in his 50s, with his wife and a teenage daughter behind him. They looked at me with polite confusion. I tried to explain, hands shaking as I showed them the pictures Pavel had sent me. The man shook his head slowly. He spoke a little English. "No, no," he said, pointing to himself. "My home, my family's home. 50 years. He had never heard of Pavel. The apartment was never for sale. And right there, standing in that hallway in Brno, the whole thing came crashing down. It felt like a physical blow. There was no distressed apartment. There was no renovation. There was no structural rot, no tax lien. There was just a story. A story sold to me by a woman with a warm smile and her cousin with the honest-looking handshake and the dust on his boots. Every dollar, every wire transfer, every moment of hope and fear and pride, it was all based on a complete fabrication. And I had paid for every last word of it. I had gone looking for something solid, and I had built my entire new life on air. The man and his family were still looking at me with the polite, concerned look you give a confused stranger on the street. I think I tried to say thank you or sorry to bother you, but no sound came out. I just turned and walked away. I don't remember the train ride back. I just remember sitting there, watching the green Czech countryside blur past the window and feeling nothing. A hollowness so complete it was a physical state, like something essential had been scooped out of my chest and left on a hallway floor in Brno. I didn't cry. I didn't feel rage. I just sat there, numb, watching the landscape go by, while my brain kept trying to reconstruct a version of events where it wasn't true, where Pavel just had the address wrong, where there had been some miscommunication. I ran through every possible alternative explanation until the math wouldn't let me anymore. When I got back to the Vinohrady apartment, it was already dark. The place I had once thought was my home, my beautiful new life, felt like a tomb. I walked through the empty rooms, Jana's absence now echoing in every corner. The high ceilings I had loved felt cold. The big windows were just black rectangles. The anger didn't come. The sadness didn't come. All that came was the math. I sat down at the kitchen table with a pen and a piece of paper and did the accounting. Starting capital, $210,000. Cash for the apartment setup, $10,000. First wire transfer to Pavel, $80,000. Second wire for the repairs, $40,000. Final panic payment for the tax line, $50,000. Total, $180,000. Gone. Sent willingly into a black hole, one rational decision at a time. I looked at my banking app. My balance, after 3 years of lifestyle spending and bank fees, was $9,012. From $210,000, the sum total of my life's work, 40 years of getting up in the dark and going to weld steel, down to $9,000. It wasn't a nightmare. It was just a series of transactions. A story I had paid for, one installment at a time, because the story was exactly what I needed to hear. And that's when I finally understood. My biggest vulnerability wasn't my loneliness or my desire for a new life, though those were real enough. It was my pride. My stupid, stubborn, blue-collar pride. The belief that I was too smart, too grounded, too much of a real-world guy to get played. I thought I could read people like I could read steel. I had spent 40 years trusting that instinct, and it had served me well. But people aren't steel. They can be hollow on the inside and look solid on the outside, and the best ones know exactly how to show you what you're looking for. All it took was a warm smile, a firm handshake, and a story that I wanted to believe more than I wanted to question it. They didn't just take my money. They took the one thing I had left that I was proud of, my own judgment. And that, more than the $9,000 left in that account, that was the most expensive loss of all. That was the thing I don't know if I'll ever get back. So that's where it ends. I'm back in this apartment in Vinohrady. My long-stay visa runs out in 2 weeks. I have a one-way ticket back to Dayton, Ohio, booked for next Tuesday morning. My son is clearing out his spare bedroom. And in my bank account sits $9,000. Out of $210,000, the price of a house and 40 years of work. That's the receipt. And I'm sitting here telling you this for a very specific reason. Because I know some of you watching are exactly where I was 3 years ago. You're lonely, you feel invisible, and you're looking at a map for an escape hatch. So listen to me. First, your real-world common sense. The gut feeling you've trusted your whole life. The instinct that got you through 40 years of hard work without getting burned is worthless here. It's calibrated for a different world, a world whose rules you understand. I spent my life reading steel, telling a good weld from a bad one just by looking at it. I thought I could do the same with people. I looked at Pavel's calloused hands and his dusty boots and thought, this is a man I understand. I was wrong. My street smarts were an American tool in a Czech toolbox. They didn't fit. They just made me overconfident and blind to the things I didn't know that I didn't know. Second, if you're a man my age and you're alone in a new country, and a beautiful younger woman gives you the kind of attention you haven't had in 20 years, you need to understand what's happening. It's not a miracle. It's a transaction. I felt so good taking Jana to nice restaurants, buying her gifts, feeling like a provider again. But I wasn't buying her happiness. I was paying for a feeling. The feeling of being seen. Your loneliness is a vulnerability, and the moment money gets involved in that kind of relationship, you are no longer a partner. You are a customer, and you will be charged whatever the market will bear. And this last one is the most important. The one that could have saved me everything. Never ever sign a document or transfer a single dollar without your own independent lawyer that you found and vetted yourself. When Jana translated that first contract for me, I felt like I had a partner. I didn't. I had a sales agent. I learned later, after it was all gone, about something called the Kataster Nemovitosti, the official Czech property register. Any real lawyer, for a couple of thousand crowns, could have checked it in 5 minutes and told me that Pavel didn't own that apartment in Brno. He never did. An $80,000 mistake could have been prevented with a $100 phone call. So now you know. I wasn't robbed at gunpoint. I was dismantled piece by piece with my own full permission and my own full participation. I helped build the trap. I handed over the tools. If you're sitting in a quiet house right now, dreaming of a cheap paradise somewhere across the ocean, you need to hear me. Your loneliness is a commodity, and there are people out there who have spent years learning exactly how to trade on it. Don't let your desire for a new life blind you to the oldest tricks in the world. Before you wire a single dollar, before you fall for a single story, before you let anyone translate a single document for you, get your own independent advice from someone your own embassy recommends, someone who works for you and only you. Don't end up like me. If this story can stop one person from making the same mistakes, it's worth more than the money I lost. It's worth more than all of it.